Buckle up, my GST Factor listeners. Today, we have a powerhouse panel of incredible women that are business professionals across a couple different industries, but they are also huge ambassadors for those with disabilities, as all three of them have their own varying disabilities that they are daily overcoming. They share some funny stories. They share some sad stories, all with that framework of you keep showing up and you keep advocating for yourself no matter what. Their ability to reframe and re-lens their circumstances and pivot and relaunch as they have overcome incredible obstacles is awe-inspiring. You get to hear from a Guinness World Record Holder. You get to hear travel stories, and you get to hear about the importance of universal accessibility for those with disabilities in the world. All three of these ladies are extremely special, extremely successful. They still travel the world despite their challenges. This was such a fun powerhouse panel of superwomen. Buckle in, like I said, as we have this incredible conversation with Renee Bruns, Brook Eby, and Stacie King on the GST Factor podcast. On today's episode, this is one of my favorite episodes this season, and this is a powerhouse panel, and I'm so excited to have everyone joining me. I have Stacie King, I have Renee Bruns, and I have Brook Eby, and today we are talking about this powerhouse group of women and how they are overcoming the challenges that they have in their lives, and we're going to dive right in. So, Stacie, please introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your story.
Yeah, nice to be here, and thank you for the warm introduction. It's pretty simple. I guess, a marketer by trade. I've been in the industry a very long time, and I specifically have been in the insurance niche and space for, I guess, about the last 14, 15 years. So it's been a long ride. I keep losing track of how long I've been in the industry, but it's been an experience. I'm enjoying it. Personally, I have a husband that I've been married to and in love with for over 31 years now. We're going on 31 years, and been with him for 33. So he's seen it all in my lifetime. And I have a son who followed me into the insurance space and is also a marketer. And so I'm very proud of him. And I just became a grandmother for the first time in November, which I'm thrilled about. It has been so just fun. He's just cute, and he's fifth, Samuel Aloysius King the fifth. So he sounds like royalty. I'm enjoying spoiling him. But my story about disability is easy to share, in that I've been kind of out and about with my disease and talking about my disability for a very long time. And I felt that I wanted to do that because it was important to share, not just for me and to kind of have an outlet to kind of get the good, the bad, and the ugly that come along with it, but to, like others have said, be authentic and to let everybody know that life is not over just because you have a disability, that you can still live for however long you have on this earth. And some people's diseases, it's different for different people, how they are able to deal with things and their lifespan. But while you're here on this earth, to enjoy life and to really make a purpose-driven life, and to be able to share your story to help someone else who's just been diagnosed to understand that it's not the end of the road, that there's a long way ahead, and you can kind of forge ahead by seeing other people and watching them thrive. So that's kind of been my motto. I go by Wobbly Girl because, again, I tell everybody I don't drink a lot because when I do, it's quite comical, but just trying to get around these days, it is kind of funny to watch. So I am wobbly all the time, and I am the wobbly girl. So I just embraced it, and I make fun of myself. It was a friend of mine that called me wobbly girl one time, and it stuck. So that's me.
Awesome, Stacie. Yes, thank you so much for your advocacy and sharing your story, because I think, again, the purpose of today's call, right, is really, and podcast is really to share the different stories. You guys all have your own different challenges, and how you guys have approached it, though. You've all done so with confidence and resilience and such a positive attitude. And so I'm really excited to amplify your stories today in hopes that it'll be encouraging and empowering to others. Brooke, to you.
Quick question, Stacie, what's your grandma name?
It's Lolly. My husband has 7 brothers and sisters. Yeah, he has 7 brothers and sisters, and his mom had Graham for years to her immediate grandchildren, and then she went by Gigi. So every name out there has been used in my family. So I tried to come up with something unique, and I thought that was cute. My husband is Pop Pop, and I'm Lolly.
I love that. Lolly sounds like the cool grandma. That's like the grandma that takes you shopping and does fun stuff.
Yes, that's it. I'll spoil him rotten, that's for sure.
That's such a cute name. My nieces decided that my parents were Mima and Peepaw when they were like kids. That was like all they could pronounce. And my mom's like, "You sound like such hillbillies." Like, that nobody asked for Mima or Peepaw, but they just got stuck with it.
So I called my grandmother Big Mama. And my husband wanted me to go by Big Mama. And I'm like, yeah, well, I would, but nobody says it right. Like, Big Mama is just like one word in the South. Right. But everyone else would say Big Mama.
Yeah.
And I just don't want to be Big Mama. So I went with Lolly.
I love it. Okay, well, I'm Brook Eby. I'm really excited to be here and meet everyone else. It's interesting. Like, I think my story is probably different. I mean, all of our stories are different, but I learn a lot from people who have been living with disabilities for a lot longer than I have, because for me, like, the first 30 years of my life were picture perfect, normal. And then one day I just started limping. And it took me 4 years after that limp started to get an official ALS diagnosis. It's a rule out diagnosis. So they have to cross everything out. So whenever people tell me like what they're living with, I'm like, oh, I was evaluated for that. I remember that one. But ultimately landed on the old Lou Gehrig. I've had it for, I guess, diagnosed for 2 years now, but technically, I guess I've been living with it for 6, which is already longer than they expect you to. They say like 2 to 5 years usually on symptom onset. So yeah, I think my life has been really different since. I've been sharing everything on social media. I am in a wheelchair full time now. Like, my body is not really cooperating the way that it used to, but just always encouraged to hear other people's stories, and especially people like living with a disability as a kid fascinates me, because like, I don't know how I would have, not that anyone had a choice, but I don't know how I would have responded versus, it happening to me in my 30s when I'd lived like a pretty normal life prior to that. So excited to chat with you all.
Awesome. Thank you, Brooke. And love the advocacy and the amplification that you are doing, and love what your employer, Salesforce, is doing to support you and the wraparound support. And we're really, just glad to have you here. And as a lot of my listeners know, I have a tie to ALS. My dad passed away from it. And so for me, re-entering the ALS world has happened through Brooke. And so I'm so grateful that she has kind of ushered me back in. We were obviously huge supporters and huge advocates, when Dad was alive, and he was amplifying and speaking and doing a ton of Lou Gehrig speeches at all the baseball games around town and doing a ton of fundraising. And after he passed, I kind of just took a step back, but Brooke has kind of brought me back into the ALS world now 10 years later. And for that, I'm grateful, because it's a chance for me to support Brooke and support those, they call them PALs, persons living with ALS, and do it in honor of my dad. So I'm so glad that Brooke is here with us. And Renee, our Guinness World Book of Record holder, share a little bit about your story.
Sure. So my name is Renee Bruns. I was actually born with a skeletal disorder, so a little bit different than Stacie and Brooke. but I've been using a wheelchair for the majority of my life. So it's really all I know. I don't know the other side of it, which is a whole interesting conversation that we can get into. But I fell into insurance about 20 years ago and worked my way up, and I was an executive at a Fortune 500. And then in 2022, I made a pretty extreme measure to just leave my career and go travel. And so I started traveling the world. I got a Guinness World Record through my travels for traveling with a disability, and now have been to 124 countries, all 50 states, and actually all 7 continents. So that's definitely my travel, my passion is the travel. But there's a lot more that goes behind the travel. I think on the surface, people see that and they think that's very exciting, but the advocacy that comes, certainly in the travel world, but just in the world in general, is super, super close to my heart.
Amazing. And Renee, love the, continuation of that advocacy that you're doing, the continued travels. So you all have traveled, and I love that, because I think, when someone is, initially diagnosed, right, I think there's this thought process of, depending on what that disability or that diagnosis is, do you keep working? Do you not work? Do you do you travel or not travel? So let's be real practical for a minute, and let's go around the table and to say, what is your biggest travel tip that you have for someone who's traveling with a disability? Stacie, to you first.
Yeah. So I have not yet been in a chair at the point where, it for me, because of the wobbling, it's a little scary, because, I can fall at any second, and I don't have great balance at all. I do use a cane or a walker full time. I cannot at this point walk without assistance. So when I travel, I either take my husband along as my helper, and he handles bags and that sort of thing, or I'll make arrangements with along the way to have someone to help me. I really feel that I haven't let it stop me at all. We went to Europe in October for our 30th wedding anniversary. And then we went to Italy, and we went to Paris, and we went all over the place. And I just embraced it. And, it's a little difficult. Renee can attest that when you're out of the country and you're in different areas, some areas are just not handicapped accessible. And you get to the point where you just have to make the best of it. And so I've always tried to, in my mind at least, not let it stop me. And so if I have to figure a way around, or for me, I had a concierge that helped to plan my trip, and they were wonderful. So instead of me having to walk far to a pier to catch the boat, I had someone drive me down to the pier so that I could, not wear myself out on the stuff, just getting to and from places. I could actually enjoy the places that I was at, because I would, kind of get a little exhausted. And my husband has learned my way of travel, which is you walk until you get too tired, and then you sit and you have a cocktail, or you watch people for a while, and then you get up and you do a little bit more. But pushing through, I guess that would be my biggest, feather in my hat. I just try to keep going.
Love that. All right, Renee, to you for this question, because Renee does her travel by herself. So I love how Stacie has her husband helping her, but Renee has done all of this travel solo. So let's hear about that, Renee.
It's really interesting. And I'm really glad that Stacie mentioned that, stop and have a cocktail, take a breather. And I think that is so important, especially alone. I mean, whether you're alone or not, it's exhausting to travel when you're perfectly able-bodied, can get up and walk around on 2 legs, but to do it with the struggles of an airport and the airlines, that's a whole separate topic. But then to, get into hotels and restaurants and things that you think are accessible and they're not, it is physically exhausting, but there's an emotional component that comes with that I think is very difficult for someone without a disability to understand. And I think my piece of advice would be to push through for sure, but allow yourself to take a few moments. And if a few moments is a day where you just want to sit in your room and scream because you're so frustrated, do that. Or you just want to be in your room or your hotel because it's accessible, then do that. And I think we need to give ourselves the grace to say, this is so frustrating. I'm having a hard time, and stop putting on that big front, because it is frustrating. It doesn't mean we can't do it, but we might need to do it a little bit differently.
It's being present in that moment, and and
100%.
being present in that moment to go, I'm going to feel the feels.
Yep.
And I'm going to have a cocktail and gear up when I'm ready. All right. So Brooke, I know that your favorite mode of transportation is trains.
Big train fan. It's just so much better. I swear I'm like Amtrak's #1 fan, and they have no idea who I am, but I'm always promoting them. I think any mode of transportation where you don't have to leave your wheelchair it needs to be like universal, because with the train, I just don't have to have that extra worry of transferring. Whereas on a plane, there's so much more to be concerned about. First, they have to get you on the plane, which requires like an aisle chair and multiple hands on you, like lifting and grabbing things. And then you also have to worry about your wheelchair under the plane, where you're like, all I hear is about people getting their chairs broken. And like, for a human, that's basically like getting your legs broken. If they break your chair, like it's like breaking your legs, minus the physical pain. Like, you're useless without it. At least I am. So yeah, big train fan. I have to go between DC and New York for work quite often. And to me, it's just like, it's so much easier to train than any other way.
Okay. So now we're going to pivot now to your funniest story. And so Brooke, I feel like you have to share the hotel story.
Yeah, it's an easy choice. I mean, there's been plenty of funny moments in hindsight, but at the moment they're like not funny at all. Like, I just little falls where like a hotel worker can like come scoop me up, and I'm just like, please don't look me in the eye. But I think the funniest one, because it was like sort of harmless, I took the train from DC to New York.
By yourself. Let's also be clear, right? Like, you are traveling by yourself. Yep.
Yeah, with a big rolly suitcase. I rolled from Penn Station to my hotel with my suitcase. And the whole time I'm like, please nobody recognize me, because I looked insane. Like, I was just charging forward. I make it to the hotel and I'm like, wow, the hardest part is over. I did it. Like, I'm here. Now I can just relax. The hotel room had 2 beds. So I'm going to like plug in some chargers next to the bed. And I can feel like, as I'm scooting in between the beds, I can feel it's like kind of a tight squeeze, but I don't think much of it. And then I plug the stuff in, I go to reverse. I'm just fully trapped in between the 2 beds. Like, I guess because my wheel's going forward, it makes it work, but then they have to like spin to reverse. They couldn't spin. There was no room. Luckily, I was right next to the phone in the hotel room. So I called and I'm like, hey, you guys have probably not heard this one before, but let me hit you with something. I am fully trapped in between the 2 beds. And they were like, okay, we'll be right up. And they sent one little man, and he came up, and luckily the beds weren't bolted, which is my fear, because I'm like, they're gonna have to call the fire department to like undo this bed. Luckily, the guy was able to just like scoot the bed as far as possible, and I was free. But that was like 5 minutes of being in the hotel room. I had already gotten stuck. I'm like, how am I going to do 4 more days here?
So you'd gone from DC to New York with no issues.
Yeah, no, it was user error at that point.
All right, Renee, talk about you can talk about your funniest moment, or it's up to you. Talk about your funniest moment, or talk about your most vulnerable moment traveling. And so you can take it either way.
I'm going to go with vulnerable. I was thinking about funny, and I have a lot of really strange stories, but I don't think anyone will be able to beat Brooke's. Vulnerable. So talking about wheelchairs and airplanes, I went to Micronesia, which is an island in the Pacific Ocean, and landed and was told, go ahead and get in the aisle chair. We're going to take you off of the plane. And I get down to the ground and my wheelchair's not there. It's in another country. It was labeled incorrectly. They put a tag on it, similar to the luggage tag. And they tell me that the next flight coming in is in 2 days. So I'm sitting on this aisle chair. And so the listeners that don't know this, when you get in an aisle chair, they strap your legs in so they don't fly off. and they often want to strap in your upper body. So you're just like tied in, and it feels like you're in a straitjacket, which for me, I use my arms all the time. So this is incredibly frustrating. So I'm down on the tarmac watching this plane drive away, listening to them tell me I don't have my chair. And I just like throw this Velcro off because I'm so like, what am I going to do? I can't move myself, need to go to the bathroom. How am I going to get to my hotel? Like, what am I going to do? And so talk about being vulnerable where you can't move yourself. You're Velcroed onto a very small chair and you have no idea where your legs are. And, Brooke mentioned it feels like they're breaking your legs, and it really does. So the very, very kind woman at the airline set me up with an extra wheelchair that they had at the airport. But this is not my wheelchair. I always equate it to, all right, so you've taken someone's shoes and you give them, let's say you wear a size 6 and they give you a size 12 boot when you're used to wearing a size 6 high heel. It's very different, and you're expected to go live your life. And how do you take a shower? How do you go to the bathroom? How do you do anything? So, the woman at this airline was incredibly helpful, helped me, got me to my hotel. But, I was there for 2 days, very trapped, couldn't really leave. I do give a lot of credit to the staff at the airline and the hotel too, but very, very vulnerable in a place where I'm having a difficult time getting to the bathroom because this happened. So very real, but it's definitely a growing opportunity if you want to spin it around to be on the positive side to go through something like that.
Thank you for sharing that. I was hoping you would share that story. That's because I think that is, I want us to talk about the funny times, the sad times, this was a really great, this was a great moment. This is not so great moment. So Stacie, to you, but I have to ask you, can you share your elevator story that you shared in our pre-show? Because I think it speaks to a number of things. You talk about that world advocacy and world inclusion, but I also think it talks about this, it's also this common sense component that I don't think that business owners and hotels and airlines and trains, I don't think that they think through all these things. And so can you share, because I love the humor that you bring to it, but I also love your transparency and vulnerability of this is what I got to do. But I also think it kind of will lead us into the next area around what is your biggest tip for business owners in the world?
So I guess the best way to cover this is we've talked about, in companies trying to be inclusive, right? And trying to make sure that people with disabilities feel like they're part of the team and that they're included in activities and all the things. I'm not saying that you have to totally cater everything to them, but just having something that they can feel a part of and be included in, that it doesn't always make them feel differently, right? So I am going out of town to a company trip. We're going to Mexico and everybody's really excited. And I felt like I had done all the things, right? You had asked all the questions because we have all this whole week planned, right? We're going to go to these restaurants. We're going to go out to eat a couple of times. We're going to have a chef there cooking for the team. You're going to have all these excursions and activities you can do. And so I'm asking the questions, about this activity. How much walking is involved? Where is it going to be? Am I able to do this as someone who uses a cane full time? If not, I'm fine hanging back and just enjoying, time with people on the way there, on the way back. Oh no, it'll be great. You'll be fine. So you ask all the questions right ahead of time. And I even made sure that my accommodations worked for me because with my disease, I have a disease called Charcot-Marie tooth disease, and it is a peripheral neuropathy. And basically what it does is it impacts my nerves, which then impact my muscles. So I have, muscle wasting in different parts of my body, can't feel my feet. And once I go to sleep, they're kind of gone for a while, my legs and my feet. So it takes a lot of effort to get my muscles moving again in the morning. So I prefer not to have to deal with any steps, right? So you can't go to the bathroom at night with any sort of step. I'm just going to be down for the count. And so those are the kinds of questions that I felt like I had done a good job asking. Okay, can I get at least just an accommodation where the bathroom and the bed are at the same level? And preferably not a ton of steps otherwise, because I need assistance with them. And so had everything covered, get there, and the meeting space that they had chosen, we're in Mexico, so I forget, there's no ADA, right? In Mexico, there's no handrails at all for anywhere in the whole house. There's tons of steps, and there are 2 flights of steps just to get to the elevator. So you get there, and I get out of the car, and I'm looking around, I'm going, okay, no handrail, 4 or 5 steps. So I'll figure out how to get up the steps, go to the front door, knock on the door, thinking, okay, we're good now. No, another 2 flights of steps to get up to where the elevator is. And then the elevator will take you to the basement and take you all up and down the house. So I did try, but at the end of the day, you just have to think through, let's be logical. If someone, has a disability and they have trouble dealing with steps, they, make sure that somebody's out there to greet them, to drag them up the steps and to help them and to do those sorts of things. And B, make sure that it's just accessible once they're there. It's just, it's at this point, I guess employers should have options for employees, and they don't want to feel like they're different. Didn't want to have to ask all the questions. I would have loved to have somebody come to me and say, hey, we know that you have this challenge. We're very aware of it. And we hired you with that intention of making sure that you feel welcome. What can we do? And all that's the only question you got to ask is, what can we do to help make this better experience for you? I need you to cater to me nonstop. I don't need, to feel special on the trip. I just want to be able to do what everyone else does, or to have someone to assist me to do that. I hope that's the best way to approach it.
Such great advice. And thank you for sharing your very vulnerable story.
You're welcome.
Brooke, for you, what do you, as you've traveled, especially you are traveling between 2 very urban cities here in the US, what do you think is the area that could use maybe the most transformation? Is it hotel rooms? Is it trains? Is it airplanes?
Not trains. It's not trains. Trains are great. No, hotel rooms, it's tough because accessible is not a universal term. Even for the 3 of us, what we need is probably all very different. So in my dream, there are different versions of accessible rooms where, you can kind of specify what doesn't work on your body, and then they can sort of cater a room to you. So for me, I am in a wheelchair full time. I need everything to be wide, 2 beds wider, but also again, the bathroom for accessible. When they say accessible, what they usually mean is just a bar around that you can grab onto. But for me, the toilets are usually so low that transferring from my wheelchair and back on is hard because they're 2 very different heights. So doing a sliding transfer is really, really hard from a low toilet. But alternatively, people who use walkers, and then for me, bed height, I don't want my bed to be too high because I have to slide on and off. But for people who use walkers and canes, they want a higher bed usually because it's that way they don't have to push themselves up too high. So I just wish there were more options, and there's technology for all of this. There are beds that raise higher and lower. So I think hotels can invest in that, but whoever's designing it, I just wish they would live one day imagining that part of their body doesn't work. When you wake up in the morning, start to finish, picture that your legs do not work or that your arms do not work. And I think you'll start realizing okay, a lot of this stuff, would be a big energy suck for someone who, can't make certain things work.
I think the technology piece is so important, right? In this day and age, right? We have the technology. So to your point, let's utilize the technology for good. Let's utilize it so that it is universal. And I think giving all of those options for people, right? We have 3 different stories here, right? And all of you travel, and I love that. And so how do we make, it's not just, to me, it's not just an accessible world, it's a universally accessible world. And I love the fact that the 3 of you are in business, and it's, how do we leverage that technology for good? All right, Renee, what is your biggest kind of tip or advice for, maybe those that are listening that, is it a travel tip or is it more of a work tip? You can take it either way.
I'm going to say travel, but I think this goes kind of both ways. And it's probably different than what you're looking for, but I think don't be afraid to advocate for yourself, because the world, travel-wise or business-wise, is going to continually tell you, this is what you need. This is what's best. Well, we have a ramp. This should work for you. And you cannot forget that you are living in your body with whatever that is, good or bad or challenging or not challenging. And don't be afraid to say, no, this is not going to work. This is what I need. And if they don't like it, that's their problem and not yours. I think advocating for yourself is my tip.
I love that. I think, and it's so applicable to everything, right? And I think it's applicable to whether you are advocating for yourself in the medical world, right? Or whether you are advocating for yourself travel-wise or work-wise. I think that that's, hugely important, and having that confidence to be able to do that and say, this is what I need. And I'm doing so unapologetically because I'm honoring my true authentic self and saying, this is me, this is who I am, these are the challenges that I have, but I'm not going to let it stop me. I'm going to keep moving forward. So, when you think about what are each of you powerfully choosing in 2024, and Renee, we'll start with you.
My choice is truth. And I think that true or truth, however, whichever word you want to use, but to be true to myself. And I have historically been very good at, this goes back to the advocacy piece, to say, well, this person, they've really sold me on this. This must be what I need. And deep down, I know that that's not what I need, or that it's not who I am. So to be true to myself in the message I'm sending to the world, in the message I'm sending to myself, because those words that I say over and over in my head are so, so important. And I want to be better at being true to who I am, because I think there's a really cool, authentic person in there. And I think we all have that. We just need to make sure we stay true to them.
Love that. Powerfully choosing truth. All right, Stacie, you're up.
I would say, first of all, I'm trying to give myself a little more grace. I tend to be a perfectionist in everything that I do, and I push to the point of just sheer exhaustion, because I want to keep going and keep doing. And so I'm trying to, as I get a little bit older, try to step back and go, okay, it's okay if I'm not going 24/7 anymore, that I take some time for me and some self-care. Then also fearlessness. I really want to, as I mentioned, I've been sharing about my disability for a very long time online. I've got wobblygirl.com as a personal brand website. And then I also launched a company called Culture is King, which is a digital publication talking about various different things: diversity, inclusion, disability inclusion. Renee is one of my key writers on the site, and I love that she does that. And I'd love to invite you, Brooke. But at the end of the day, that whole thing was about putting myself out there and putting others out there and shining a light on what needs to happen. And that is a little bit more education on how to be inclusive in all the ways. And especially with people with disabilities, I want people to just ask those questions. How can we help you? The conversation needs to be there. And like Renee mentioned, you have to kind of advocate for yourself, but you also have to understand that people just don't know because they've not been in our shoes, right? Sometimes they don't mean to not include us in something, or they think that it's going to be okay because somebody told them, oh, a person with a disability can do this. They don't realize that there are levels of disability, as Brooke mentioned. So just asking questions, just teaching people that work in business to ask questions to better understand those around them. And so fearlessness to put myself out there and to really own that voice, I guess, is
and
the best way to say that.
Be curious. Yes. Love that. All right, Brooke, over to you. What are you powerfully choosing?
I'm going to say confidence, because I think this conversation, I've been living with this for a few years only. And even though it seems like a long time for me, hearing people who have lived with a wheelchair or mobility aids for their whole life, like, to me is so impressive. And I think I'm good at faking confidence a lot, but there's some days where I'm like, it's weird that I'm sitting. And everyone else is like, it does feel sometimes like you just feel really different. And so I think I just have to sort of like quiet that voice and move forward, because this is the path I'm on. And so I think other people in this conversation have inspired me to do that.
Well, and what I love about this is because my next question to all of you is going to be, what is that GSD factor attribute that you're really honing in on? So Brooke, you knocked it out with your powerfully choosing and now. So Stacie, back to you. What is that attribute of be confident, inquisitive, imaginative, present, resilient, or influential that you think that's really resonating for you in your journey at the moment?
Being present, I love, because, it's easy to hide and to say, I'm just gonna kind of, be in the background and I'm not gonna say anything. And I'm just kind of, for me, being present is making myself be out there every day. And to own where I'm at in the journey. Today is not what I'm going to look like in 10 years. It's not my position that I'll be in 10 years. So I look back at my life, like Brooke mentioned, I've known about my disease since I was 6 years old. I've watched other people in my family deal with this disease. So like, some people have a superpower. I can walk into a house and in 5 minutes tell you if the house is wheelchair accessible. Or Brooke, everything needs to be wider. That doesn't work. That needs to be changed, because we've dealt with it with my father and his sisters and that sort of thing. And now, I'm kind of in that path where being present is allowing yourself to be happy with the point that you're at in your life and to not wish your life away, right? I constantly, all of my life, I said, "Ooh, I want to do this and I got to do that." And I'm wishing my life away. And I didn't really appreciate the years that I had when I had them. I look back in pictures and I go, "Oh my gosh, look what I was able to do. Look how I was able to get around so much better," or look, whatever. And I don't want to do that anymore. I don't want to wish my life away. I don't want to say, "Oh, that was a great time. I wish I could do that." Or be sad about the past. I want to be excited about the present or the future, but I also want to be excited about the present. I want to enjoy today and be grateful for my grandson and all the things and the blessings that we all have, right? That's the name of the game.
Amazing. All right, Renee, bring us home. What's your attribute that's resonating with you the most at the moment?
I'm going to go with inquisitive. So having been around the world in the past year and a half and just seeing different people and cultures and the way that I've been treated, good and bad, I have been trying to make a very conscious effort when I'm at a grocery store and the checkout clerk is maybe grumpy or not so nice, or the person behind me is very pushy, to kind of pause and say, it is impossible for me to know what's going on in their life. They're not going to tell me here in the supermarket. And to just kind of be inquisitive to maybe they had something tragic happen to them today, and take that moment to pause and then, kind of reflect on why they are responding that way and give them that grace. But then to also flip that around and do that for myself. When I wake up and I'm not in a good mood, to say, what is going on that I'm not, that I'm not feeling so great, and to pause and give myself some grace to feel that feeling. And so I'm going to go with inquisitive, to just kind of be inquisitive with myself, but with the rest of the world and the people around me.
Amazing. All three of you, thank you so much for joining me on this podcast today. It has been such an honor and a delight to have you all. And to our listeners, please feel free to reach out to our amazing guests here, Stacie and Renee and Brooke. All of their contact information is within the show notes. And we hope that you've enjoyed this authentic conversation. And thank you three for your advocacy and your confidence. And I'm just so glad to have had you all on here. All three of you are GSD women. You are getting shit done. And, so grateful to have you in my circle. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you
for having us.
So nice meeting you all.
Talking with you all.
Awesome. Thank you so much to our listeners. And don't forget to get shit done.
Thanks for listening to the GSD Factor podcast. If you liked this episode, please rate and subscribe on your favorite podcast platform, where you can also find previous episodes. Let's also connect on LinkedIn and Instagram. If you're looking for more information on the GSD Factor, visit us at gsdfactor.com. And always remember to GSD, get shit done.